Boy reveals dad's secret, teacher takes him to ER. After it seemed like Camden wasn't doing so well, his teacher decided to get to the bottom of it. The 4-year-old would tell his teacher something concerning. After hearing what Camden told her, she couldn't believe her ears. He was scared of seeing his dad. When people went into teaching, it was because typically they have a very important characteristic, a nurturing side. A teacher needed to be compassionate with children and be willing to shape their minds. Nancy Blower is an ordinary kindergarten teacher who always tried to give her best to her children. She always went above the call of duty when it came to teaching. Camden was normally a cheery young boy, but recently his demeanor changed, and he started to become quieter and quieter. His grades started slipping, and he started to become antisocial. He didn't want to interact with his classmates anymore. What was going on? She knew that she couldn't let poor Camden get worse. She had to figure out what the problem was. She was his teacher after all. Nancy wanted to talk to Camden and figure out exactly what was wrong with him. Once they had had their talk, she understood that things started at home. She needed to fix things somehow. Nancy decided that she would give Camden's dad a call. She wanted to find out more information about the problem. The call wasn't an easy one to make. Nancy managed to find his father's number through his records. She put his number into her phone and then dialed him. But his father wouldn't be ready for what she had to ask. It turned out that his name was Daryl. He feared the worst when she called. Was everything fine? But once he understood what she was asking about, he couldn't believe it. He had no idea that Camden would go to his teacher with the problem that they had. But now that she knew, she asked him a frightening question. After second-guessing herself, she felt that she was in the right. She remembered how sad Camden was. She needed to make it right. She had to put it delicately, otherwise it may scare him off. But what Daryl said made her have to act quickly. The problem that Camden had at home was like nothing Nancy had ever encountered as a teacher. Camden told Nancy that men in uniforms frequently came to talk to his father. Camden just didn't want his father to go away. Nancy needed to act quickly to think of something, but what could she really do anyway? Nancy didn't want to have to get involved in Camden's personal life. She felt it wasn't her right. But with all her experience helping children over the years, she had to try and help Camden. She knew scenarios like this can get worse over time. Camden was very upset when he told Nancy what was wrong. He was too young to understand why things were happening to his dad. In Camden's eyes, Nancy was the world. He felt like the only person capable of helping him would be her. She gave him her word that everything that she could do, she would do. Even if it meant her taking the fall, the first thing Nancy had to do was decide. Nancy had a hunch, but she had to be absolutely sure going forward. It was one of the hardest decisions she ever had to make. She was determined to give Camden the life he so deserved, but nobody could have ever suspected that she would go this far, least of all Camden's father. As soon as school was out, Nancy rushed to the nearest hospital to fill out the required paperwork. Then she made an appointment for psychological counseling. It was required that she was sure of her mental state going forward. She knew what she was about to embark on wouldn't be easy. After a string of tests, Nancy finally got the results. Her psychological evaluation looked good. Her mind was sound enough to do what she needed to do, and her body was strong enough to handle what was coming her way. The tests proved that Nancy was not only willing to help Camden, but that she was the only one who could. It turned out that Camden's dad, Daryl Peterson, wasn't doing so well health-wise. In fact, Daryl's future looked pretty bleak. He was having serious problems with the functioning of his kidneys. They were only operating at 20% of their capacity. During the dialysis treatment he was getting, he looked so sick that Camden was distraught by the reality of it. That's when Nancy decided to do something amazing. This is where the story begins to get interesting. You would think teacher Nancy would offer to babysit and take care of Camden when Daryl couldn't. Not only did she feel bad for Daryl, but she was worried about how Camden would be affected. But this goes far beyond that kind of menial support. Nancy wanted to solve the family's problems. After Nancy asked Daryl the very important question, the teacher decided that she would help the family in any way possible and make an extraordinary offer. She underwent all the required tests and filled out all the paperwork. Luckily for Daryl, it turns out that Nancy was a perfect match. A match for what exactly? Camden's family was obviously in complete awe. There aren't many people that would be willing to offer to donate one of their own kidneys. Days before the procedure, Camden's family visited Nancy at the school with flowers and many thank yous. I had friends and family come forward who wanted to donate, but these didn't work out for medical reasons or other reasons, Daryl said later. Then Miss Nancy approached me. After numerous interviews with local news stations who all praised Nancy for her selflessness, the big moment had finally arrived. She said her goodbyes and drove to the hospital to complete the procedure. Daryl later said that he was having second thoughts, concerned about Nancy's health, but she was determined and ready to risk it all. Iowa's best transplant surgeons Alan Reed, MD, Zoe Stewart Lewis, MD, PhD, and Daniel Katz, MD, assured Nancy's fans that she was in the best hands. The attending surgeons and nurses stayed by Daryl and Nancy's side the entire time, ensuring that the pair stayed calm during the procedure. You could tell that every person wanted to be there for you, Daryl explained. But was the surgery a success? The transplant procedure was a success. The family, overwhelmed by Nancy's generosity, were waiting for her as soon as she came to. They rushed in to hug and kiss her and promised that they will always be a second family to her and support her however they could. What she had given them was priceless, and nobody was more grateful than Camden. Of course, Camden was ecstatic. Seeing his dad healthy and energetic again after such a long illness made his heart fill with joy. Simply unable to hide his happiness, he thanked his teacher Nancy and made her a promise. He'd be the best student she'll ever have. But there were still a few more things that the family had to do. After the successful procedure, Daryl and Nancy decided to take action. They wanted to raise awareness about the importance of organ donation and tried to call attention to the University of Iowa Transplant Center team. Soon the media got wind of Nancy's act of generosity and were happy to help her with her new cause. But Nancy remains humble. I had a coworker who years ago had donated a kidney to someone in her church, Nancy said in an interview. It was an important part of her life's journey, and that was inspirational to me. When I heard about Daryl and Camden's situation, it just felt like the right thing to do. When Nancy had received the news that she was a match for Daryl, she couldn't have been happier. I was really excited about it. I was ecstatic. I didn't know what I would have done for closure if I wasn't a match, she stated later. But what does Daryl have to say about the woman who saved his life? She's a part of my family for the rest of her life, whether she likes it or not, he said. The Iowa City team is a part of my family. Everything's just been amazing, and I hope everyone has the same experience I had. How do you ever thank someone for saving your life? Daryl asks. She really is an amazing woman. Nancy went above and beyond as a teacher and a human being when she decided to help Camden's dad. Teachers are always prepared for unusual situations. Our next teacher is no exception. When Mrs. Neighbors checked her student's backpack one morning, nothing could have prepared her for what she found inside, nor the reaction of her students. It was only after morning work that Mrs. Neighbors finally remembered her duty and went along her way to search student backpacks and book bags. She found the usual things: books, pencils, and the occasional snack that was supposed to be in her lunchbox. All was normal until one girl looked nervous. Bag checks are becoming increasingly necessary as we march on through the year. From benign distractions like cell phones and fidget toys, with obvious exceptions, to malicious products that do harm on the inside and outside of the student body, teachers and security must be on high alert. But surely the younger kids get a pass? Unfortunately, elementary school students are now subjected to the same laws as the older students. They can never be too young to be assumed a criminal. This attitude has sparked outrage in many a teacher-parent sphere, and parents wonder, will this accusation cause my kids to lose their innocence? While the question of innocence may not be a question lawmakers and security guards can answer, one thing is for certain: sometimes it is necessary. Though most kids bringing banned items may not be doing it out of a want to harm their classmates, hurt them they certainly can, through allergies, sharp objects, or simple clumsy fingers. Just like every other school, student safety is a top priority for Jefferson Elementary School in Jefferson County, Georgia. As a result, students of all grades get their bags checked by the teachers after the morning announcements. Most teachers don't expect to find more than a gaming system, but today was different for Mrs. Neighbors. Mrs. Bobby Neighbor teaches second grade at the Jefferson Elementary School. Though young, she trusts that the kids know what and what not to bring to school that day, and generally doesn't sweat over checking student bags for a little extra safety. Generally, the kids don't either, until that day when she noticed something unusual. That morning, the kids had been excited. The morning announcements had mentioned an upcoming book fair, and no matter how old a kid is, book fairs are one of the most exciting events of the year. Ask anyone in a public school, they'll tell you. This, to her regret, distracted her from checking the bags first. It had taken a bit to get the wound-up second graders to focus on their morning work, so the routine took even longer than usual. In fact, Miss Neighbors had almost forgotten to do the bag checks at all. What contraband could they possibly be smuggling in? A Nintendo? Nevertheless, she started checking them. From the way one student acted, it was much more than a game. As Mrs. Neighbors bent to check her bag, she found with a start that the bag was moving. For those uninitiated with backpacks, move they certainly do not. She reached down to open it, concerned about what she'd find inside. A pair of eyes greeted her, the tiny face of a brown puppy. Mrs. Neighbors pulled the dog out of the little girl's backpack and looked over at her. She could punish her for bringing a dog to school. The little girl could endanger the children with pet allergies. But Mrs. Neighbors had another option. Mrs. Neighbors gently passed the small dog around, to the wonderment of her students. Each one got a chance to hold and pet him, and he quickly became a classroom favorite. After all, the girl was too young to be punished harshly when she only couldn't part from her animal friend. One question remained, though. Where had the dog come from? Mrs. Neighbors asked the girl, whose name remains anonymous. She had the most classic, honest answer that could come from a child. My mom must have put him in there. Because of course she did. The child had nothing to do with it. The fun couldn't last forever, however. Though he was a class hit and quite calm for a puppy, he couldn't stay in the classroom forever. The puppy, named Jake, had to go home. Mrs. Neighbors called the girl's mother to come pick him up from school, back to his food and water and puppy pan. Before he left, though, she made a decision. She knew the announced book fair still needed a mascot for it to be official, and it seemed he was already popular with her impromptu focus group. Jake became the mascot, and his slogan, "Pause for a good book," gave the event a personal touch. But what other effects did Jake have on the school? Jake isn't the only dog who's been at school now. There's a local service dog named Dottie who attends to one of the students. A good working dog. Jake probably wouldn't like the shared attention, though. Our next book-loving teacher did something that most people would never dream of. Something that shows just how much she loves her students, even if it took her to the hospital. Stephanie Hume knew the pandemic was going to throw everything into chaos, and if the parents were struggling with wave after wave of bad news and uncertainty, she knew that their kids were also drowning in insecurities about, well, just about everything. Her classes were well known for being full of happy energy. Even the students that didn't really like school always ended up loving the time they spent with her. She made kids love reading, even the ones who didn't really get why books were so amazing. But it came at a cost. Even from her home computer, Hume would enthusiastically read through whatever book was on the docket that week. She loved seeing the joy and awe in students' eyes as she pictured the story unfolding in their minds. But Hume was so focused on herself, she started to neglect her own health. This, in turn, took her to the hospital with a devastating diagnosis. She had heard the word before, but it was never something she would have pictured herself going through. As the doctor pointed at her x-rays and blood work, her mind wasn't on the idea of her hair falling out or what the treatments would do to her body. It was on the kids. How were they going to take it? It was right then and there in the doctor's office that she decided exactly what to do. She was going to fight the cancer, so she could keep on doing what she loved the most. However, it involved an odd green light from her doctor, one that he couldn't even believe she asked. Despite her begging, he had already told her there was no way he was letting her go home or back in the classroom yet. This is where the compromise came in. There were two important things she needed to do before the surgery. The idea of having a subpar substitute teacher in front of her class made her feel even sicker, so the first thing she did was call her mother, who had been a teacher for over 20 years. She was the only one Hume trusted to get the job done while she was away. The second condition required a computer. Hume sat straight in her hospital bed, complete with dotted hospital gown and IV drip, and opened the online meeting room. One way or another, she was going to finish reading the last chapter of the book they were on. She beamed a bright smile as the online classroom went from 0 to full in seconds. It didn't matter that she wasn't in her normal makeup or vibrant school clothes. The only thing she wanted was to assure her precious kids that she was going to be okay. She would come back to them as soon as possible. She reached for her book. It was clear that Hume had been born to teach. She flipped through the pages and read the story with lots of entertaining body language and different voices for every single character. She knew without a doubt their smiles would help her through the coming trials.